The Second World War is often remembered through images of armies clashing on land and aircraft dueling in the skies. Tanks roll across Europe. Cities burn beneath bombing raids. Battles are marked by front lines, flags, and ruined capitals. But far from cameras and headlines, a quieter war unfolded. One fought in darkness, isolation, and silence. It took place beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. This was a war without crowds or victory parades. Crews vanished without witnesses. Ships disappeared without warning. Decisions made in steel tubes hundreds of feet below the waves determined whether nations lived or starved. And long before Allied armies stormed beaches or crossed rivers, the outcome of the war was already being decided, slowly, relentlessly, beneath the sea. This was the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous campaign of the Second World War, and without winning it, nothing else could have been won. When war erupted in 1939, Britain faced a nightmare scenario. As an island nation, it depended entirely on maritime supply. Food, fuel, ammunition, raw materials, almost everything that kept Britain alive arrived by ship. If those sea lanes were severed, the country would collapse without a single soldier setting foot on its shores. Germany understood this perfectly. The German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, knew it could not defeat Britain in a traditional naval battle. The Royal Navy was larger, more experienced, and controlled most of the world's oceans. So Germany turned to a weapon designed not for open battle, but for invisibility. The U-boat. German submarines were not meant to fight fleets. They were hunters, stalking alone or in packs, slipping silently beneath the waves, striking without warning, and vanishing again into darkness. Their mission was simple: sink merchant ships faster than Britain could replace them. If they succeeded, Britain would starve, and the war would end without an invasion. At first, the U-boat campaign was devastatingly effective. In the early years of the war, merchant ships crossed the Atlantic largely unprotected. Convoys were disorganized, escorts were scarce, and anti-submarine technology was primitive. U-boat commanders exploited these weaknesses mercilessly. Torpedoes slammed into cargo ships at night. Explosions lit the horizon. Crews scrambled into lifeboats as ships broke apart beneath them. Often, no help came. The Atlantic was vast. Rescue was uncertain. Each ship that sank meant fewer supplies reaching Britain. Each delay meant rationing tightened. Each successful patrol emboldened German commanders. The ocean itself became a battlefield, one with no fixed front line, no safe zones, and no civilians spared. For the men aboard the U-boats, the war was brutal in a different way. Submarines were cramped, damp, and perpetually dark. Crews slept inches from engines and torpedoes. Fresh air was rare. Food spoiled quickly. Diesel fumes hung in every compartment. Patrols could last weeks, sometimes months. And once submerged, escape was nearly impossible. If a submarine was damaged or detected, it became a steel coffin. Depth charges could crush hulls like paper. One mistake, one mechanical failure, and the crew vanished forever. Despite the danger, U-boat crews pressed on. Early successes convinced Germany that Britain could be strangled into submission. But beneath the waves, the balance of power was already beginning to shift. Britain responded the only way it could, by learning to fight an enemy it could not see. The Royal Navy reorganized its entire strategy around convoy warfare. Merchant ships were grouped together, protected by destroyers and corvettes equipped with sonar, depth charges, and relentless discipline. At first, the escorts were inadequate. There were gaps in coverage, especially in the mid-Atlantic, where land-based aircraft could not reach. These areas became known as the air gap, hunting grounds where U-boats operated with near impunity. German submarines adapted quickly. They formed wolf packs, coordinating attacks by radio. One U-boat would spot a convoy and shadow it, calling others in to strike en masse under cover of darkness. Losses soared. By 1942, the situation had become critical. Allied ships were being sunk faster than they could be built. Oil tankers burned off the American coast. Entire convoys vanished. The Atlantic appeared lost. But the war beneath the ocean was not static. It was an arms race. Technology against tactics, detection against concealment. Slowly, the Allies began to turn the tide. New sonar systems improved submarine detection. Radar allowed escorts to spot surfaced U-boats at night. High-frequency direction finding helped locate enemy transmissions. Aircraft patrols expanded, shrinking the air gap. Most importantly, the Allies learned to integrate everything. Ships, planes, intelligence, and technology were woven into a single system. Convoys became moving fortresses. U-boats found it harder to approach without being detected. And then, a quiet breakthrough changed everything. German U-boats relied on encrypted radio communications to coordinate attacks. These messages were encoded using complex cipher machines believed by Germany to be unbreakable. They were wrong. Allied codebreakers gradually learned to read German naval communications. Convoy routes were adjusted, traps were laid. Escorts waited exactly where U-boats thought no one would be. For the submariners, the ocean grew suddenly hostile. Patrols that once promised easy kills now ended in disaster. Depth charges rained down. Aircraft appeared without warning. Entire wolf packs were destroyed. Losses mounted. By 1943, the U-boat arm was hemorrhaging experienced crews faster than Germany could replace them. Submarines were still dangerous, but no longer dominant. The hunters were becoming the hunted. This turning point in the Atlantic was invisible to most people at the time. There were no dramatic announcements, no decisive battles with clear winners. But strategically, it was the moment the war tilted irreversibly against Germany. Because control of the Atlantic meant control of logistics, and logistics meant everything. Across the ocean, the United States was mobilizing its industrial power on an unprecedented scale. Factories churned out tanks, aircraft, ammunition, and vehicles by the tens of thousands. But none of it mattered unless it could cross the Atlantic. Every soldier who would one day land in Europe depended on a supply chain that stretched thousands of miles over open water. If the Atlantic had been lost, there would have been no invasion of North Africa, no landings in Italy, no buildup in Britain, no D-Day. The war beneath the ocean was deciding whether the war on land could even happen. As Allied control improved, convoys began arriving with fewer losses. Supplies flowed. Armies grew. Germany, meanwhile, faced a dilemma. Its submarine fleet could no longer operate effectively, but abandoning the Atlantic meant conceding the war's foundation. New submarine designs were rushed into development. New tactics were tested. But it was too late. By the time these innovations appeared, Allied air cover was nearly continuous. Detection systems were too advanced. The ocean had become transparent. The Atlantic was no longer Germany's weapon. It was its graveyard. The human cost of this hidden war was staggering. Tens of thousands of sailors, merchant seamen, naval crews, submariners died far from home. Many have no graves, only coordinates in an endless sea. Their stories were rarely told during the war. There were no victory headlines when a convoy arrived safely, no medals for ships that were not sunk. Survival itself was the achievement, but without them the war would have ended very differently. By 1944, when Allied armies landed in Normandy, the outcome of the Atlantic struggle was already clear. The sea lanes were secure. Supplies poured into Europe in overwhelming numbers. Germany could no longer replace its losses, on land, in the air, or beneath the waves. The war beneath the ocean was over. The war above it was already decided. History often focuses on moments of spectacle, landings, breakthroughs, surrenders. But the Atlantic reminds us that wars are not always won in moments. Sometimes they are won in endurance, in nights without stars, in cold steel hulls, in convoys that arrive quietly, carrying the future with them. The Second World War was decided long before its final battles, by a secret war beneath the ocean, where control of the Atlantic meant control of history itself.